Շատ շնորհակալ եմ։ Կցանկանայի սկսել խոսքս իմ երախտիկս հայտնելով պարոն Հակոբ Փանոսյանին այս հրավերի համար եւ ARPA ինստիտուտին ոչ միայն այս հրավերի, այլ նաեւ այս հնարավորության համար խոսքս ասելու եւ ձեզ ներկայացնելու իմ վերլուծությունները, նաեւ շատ ուրախ եմ, չափազանց ուրախ եւ երջանիկ տեսնելու ինձ համար հարազատ մարդկանց այստեղ, իսկապես հարազատ։ Այո, այո։ Եվ դա հրաշալի է։ Ես կփորձեմ ուրեմն եւ հայերեն եւ անգլերեն խոսել, եթե դա բոլորի համար ընդունելի եւ հարմար է։
Անգլերենի կարիքը չկա։
Անգլերենի կարիքը չկա։
Չէ, պետք է երկու կա, շնորհակալ եմ։
Եղավ, բայց այսպես փորձեմ անել, ուրեմն ոչ թե նույնը երկու լեզվով, այլ շարունակական։ Շատ լավ։ What happened in Armenia called Velvet Revolution? It was an outstanding event, not only for our nation, not only for the neighborhood, the region where Armenia is located, not only for the post-Soviet space, but I would say for the entire world. Why is that? Because we witnessed a completely new phenomenon. A phenomenon was there. Non-violent revolution was there, where there were many non-violent revolutions worldwide. There was even the name Velvet Revolution is not new. It comes from Czechoslovakia, 1989. And very many other traits and characteristics that I will be presenting to you. But this is Armenian Revolution, which is marked by its Armenianness. You can see here on this slide, I put two pictures, and it shows the distinctiveness of the Armenian Velvet Revolution in dancing and singing. There was no revolution so far in the world. Humankind didn't reach that point where the revolution can be victorious by singing and dancing people, by happy people. Normally, it is well known that revolution has its bright and dark sides. Very often also dark pages throughout history we know. But in Armenia, we all witness a situation when people are happy. Did you see a revolution when people are smiling? Everyone smiles. It is a manifestation of happiness en masse. And there is a reason for that we will be exploring. But until coming to that point, let's all characterize in depth this revolution as very special, as very unique, I would say. And one of the features also of this revolution that women played not just an instrumental role, but a key role in this revolution. You can see that throughout pictures, you can see that throughout the spirit that was prevailing and continues to prevail in Armenia. We can talk about the entire society being fully engaged in this revolution. So even children, you can see on the slide, even children, it's kind of a delightful carnival of people. And also, another factor that I would like to highlight. This is when I was working at the United Nations, UN people like to use the term positioning of the organization. Here I can use the term positioning of Armenia worldwide in the international arena. Armenia was positioned differently through this revolution, and today Armenia is perceived, and Armenian nation is perceived differently worldwide. We all are very proud of our nation. We are proud of our history, though our nation faced tragic pages also in its history. But we are very proud of our culture. We are very proud of our civilization. We are very proud of our sons and daughters, proud of our prominent individuals that make us proud. I'm talking about Charles Navur, I'm talking about Kirk Krikorian, I'm talking about Aram Khachaturian. But it's a completely different feeling when the nation in its entirety is perceived differently. Not this or that individual. Those are complimenting terms. Not just this or that individual that makes us proud, but as a nation. We can be very proud today because in every corner of the globe, when we talk about, and if anyone talks about Armenians, Armenia, they say, oh, that's different. That's a revolution of smiles. That's a manifestation of happiness. That's non-violent power change. That's a leap forward through flowers and dancing and singing. That's a completely different notion of the nation. Years back, I was traveling to Kamloops, which is in British Columbia, Western Canada. My daughter used to study there at Thompson Rivers University from Los Angeles, and I landed in the Kamloops airport, and at that time I had Armenian diplomatic passport, and I handed over to the immigration officer my passport. When he saw Armenia, he said, "Are you from country of Aram Khachaturian?" I said, "Yes, I am." And he was waving to others, all his colleagues. Come, 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 there is someone from Aram Khachaturian's country. It's amazing. It's amazing, this feeling. But also I want to again reiterate, when we are perceived as nation differently, we are positioned differently today in the world. We stand firmer on the ground in the world under the sun. That's a fact. Phenomenon of Nikol Pashinyan as a national leader. So what happened in Armenia is kind of a miracle, and we should give credit to Nikol Pashinyan as a leader. And I remember years when he was editor-in-chief of Հայկական Ժամանակ newspaper, daily in Armenia. It was a fresh air. It was different. So also going back to those years. So his experience also is fascinating. And if we try to remember, if we try to identify some pages in our history when overwhelmingly Armenia, the entire nation, Armenia, Artsakh, and diaspora have the same opinion, same attitude, perceive in the same way one national leader, it is, to say rare, that means to say nothing. It's phenomenal. And one of the greatest achievements of Nikol Pashinyan, I believe, is not just leading the nation, not only successfully accomplishing this transition, this revolution, but also inspiring national awakening. It's really national awakening that now our nation is undergoing. I want to discuss in this context also constitutionality of the path of the Armenian nation throughout different periods of history. I want to go back to 1988 to 1991, that period when Armenia was shaped as an independent nation. Yes, sorry. To that period when Armenia was shaped as an independent nation, and come to our days, and to view, to analyze this progress from the viewpoint of constitutionality and following strictly the legal system, the legal framework, that enabling legal framework. And you can see on my slide that when, first of all, we all know that the breakup of the Soviet Union originated in Armenia and Karabakh. So that's a fact. So the movement, independence movement that started in Armenia and Karabakh eventually brought down the entire Soviet Union, the empire. The empire collapsed. But it's very interesting to see, like, how was that transition? It's already in the past, but we need to understand very interesting, again, peculiarity of Armenia's stance, of Armenia's policy at that time. When Gorbachev called the referendum for the future of the Soviet Union, when it was apparent that Soviet Union cannot survive, and launched Novo-Ogarev process, at that time, that all relates to March 1991 and subsequent months. At that time, Armenia decided to fully abide by the constitution of the Soviet Union. Armenia was the only constituent republic that chose that path, of fully abiding by that constitution, Article 72, and declare its independence based on Soviet constitution. What happened? At that time, when in March, Gorbachev announced this new process of establishing a new treaty and launching the independence process, at that time, the first country, like 6 constituent republics, decided not to go along with this process and to launch their parallel process. 6 republics of that time. First one was Estonia, which proclaimed its independence in March 1991. Then, Lithuania. Lithuania proclaimed. And Lithuania announced that it's not just declaring its independence, but reinstating independence. So their concept was different of independence. Lithuania and Estonia and Latvia followed this pattern. They proclaimed their independence. Then Georgia did. And you can see here that Georgia declared its independence in April 1991, followed by Azerbaijan in August. And Armenia held its referendum on September 21st, 1991. Why in September? Why Armenia was last? Because in the Article 72 of the Soviet Constitution, the last constitution was of 1977. It stated that the constituent republics have the right of succession, but at the same time, there was a stipulation of a 6 months time period, that they were supposed to wait for 6 months. When the process started in March and referendum was held in September, Armenia fully complied by the Soviet constitution, and I'm reiterating, Armenia was the only constituent Soviet republic that did so and proclaimed its independence. So, starting at that time, experts started to analyze, like, why Armenia behaves differently. Why Armenia behaves, like all these countries were considered to be part of the one region. Of course, Baltics, different, other republics different, southern part different. But why Armenia in this spectrum of different countries on different levels, with different heritages, with different constitutional or legal legacies, Armenia acts differently. And also post-independence period, so very many countries underwent instability, civil war, and Armenia was able to avoid civil war. And very many experts, again, I remember those years, were concluding that, the Armenian national myth is very strong. It keeps together the people of Armenia. So they approach differently to these matters. They see things differently. And we come all the way to the revolution of 2018, non-violent, peaceful, people smiling, accomplished revolution. The same phenomenon with different manifestation. Same, peaceful, non-violent, and complying with the legal framework, completely, with the Republic of Armenia Constitution. Everything was done according to the laws and Constitution and the most important law of Armenia, which is the Constitution. So, and it brings me to the following analysis. Why is that? Why is that? Let me share with you some of those analyses. First, we should know that history, in my opinion, that's my opinion, history played and plays a very important role in shaping collective mindset of the Armenian nation and directing in that constitutionality way. For example, the Armenian genocide. I am pretty much convinced that the Armenian genocide has a very strong impact on the mindset of people. Even we know that Armenian mothers, they are overprotective as far as their children are concerned, sometimes, very often, overwhelmingly. Also, when the Armenians see dangers, challenges, very serious risks, so they act differently. They are cautious. I want to summarize that. They are wise. This is an expression of wisdom. So that was our path, that we are very proud. And also, let's not forget that even in the 5th century AD, Movses Khorenatsi was telling, "Ivi shapat michi pasharyal kank." Professor Kawi will confirm that. "Ivi shapat michi pasharyal kank." We are, if I try to translate, besieged by dragons. We are besieged among dragons. So, at first glance, like, what kind of a concept is that? So, the concept is that we are surrounded by enemies. And so, it's a frightening concept, but it was the reality for centuries and centuries, and this reality also had its impact. We have also friends, very many friends. and allies in the neighborhood, but also as far as Armenia was on the crossroads. I don't need to tell you, you all know that what was our fate, how difficult it was. So many wars were fought on our land, and that it always, in each case, becomes a lesson learned. It becomes a lesson learned for not only individuals, but for the nation in its entirety. It's a lesson learned. And then, I don't want to discuss in detail the development of that concept, but eventually, and the Republic of Armenia, our first Republic of Armenia of 1918-1920 was a very important period in statecraft. And coming to our present independence of Armenia, let me tell that the roots of the mentality, I don't want to tell of the establishment of the elites, but the entire nation, is that we should rely on our own possibilities, on our own strengths, and the previous concept that there should be a power, an empire, or just a state that will extend its helpful hand to Armenia always throughout history. That was the concept. Going back to 4th century, Dashan's Tucht, but in reality it was written in Armenian Kingdom of Cilicia, not in the 4th century. Again, that Armenians was expecting assistance from the West, was expecting assistance from the North, was expecting assistance from Northwest. So assistance that a country will come and save Armenia and Armenians. But in 1988, the whole concept changed. No, yes, we should have friends, we should have allies. We have very many countries and individuals who are friends of Armenia. You know what does it mean? It's a landmark term, friends of Armenia. But we should rely on our own strength. And that concept I see in the present day political developments in Armenia. And those are not only political, those are comprehensive. And plus, it's a UN term that I used to circulate a lot of documents, to produce documents using this term, proven experience. And Armenia was singled out by its proven experience of accomplishing a revolution peacefully, by non-violent means, by manifestation of happiness. And in today's world, maybe it's more precious, it's more valuable than ever before, because it's a volatile time. And we see that very many countries that we consider to be strongholds of democracy, those are trembling. We live in this time period, which is temporary, of course. The humankind goes forward, but Armenia serves an example, and I am very proud of that. Also, I want to talk about the role of Georgia as a next-door neighbor. We had the tradition in Armenia with my family. We are spending New Year in Tbilisi, in Georgia. I like very much Tbilisi as a city, and on Armenian Christmas we were back to spend Armenian Christmas with the extended family, but New Year always were in Georgia. And when we were going to Georgia, and I can tell you that so many people from Armenia, they visit Georgia throughout the year. Very many, thousands and hundreds of thousands of people go to Georgia. And when in Georgia changes happened, starting 2003, 2004, so we were witnessing that change, starting from like how highway patrol police acts in Georgia, no bribes, completely different attitude, very polite, manners, etc. It was fascinating for us. And so no corruption, at least on very many levels. It was like, wow, we wish we had the same. It was really fascinating. And everyone going from Armenia, it was just next door. So you see that almost every day, you see, and like it's an example. And we're thinking like, wow, so the Soviet period of corruption, of developing corruption traditions, those are so powerful that maybe we need years and years, maybe decades to break that traditions, to develop new traditions. And what we saw in Georgia, just in a couple of months, I'm talking about months, it changed. So on the level of police, on the level of municipalities, on the level of universities, education, not just higher education, so no corruption. So, and every Armenian spoke about that or didn't speak about that, bear that in mind. That is possible. That is possible. That turns into a dream. That turns into a, or complements and supplements the vision for the future that as nation we have and have. But we also, Georgia also was a lesson learned for us. We also concluded that if reforms are not comprehensive, then those can be not reversed, but they can malfunction, they can stop. So, for example, President Saakashvili, in those years, so probably he didn't have time, or the time didn't come for that, but whatever, he didn't complete reforms in judiciary. And that had such a strong impact on the entire situation, because judiciary matters. Judiciary is very important. It's key. So reforms were completed in very many areas, but not judiciary. And we saw the results. I don't need to elaborate it on. We saw the results. And we saw also very many negative manifestations along with those positive developments, positive reforms. And it was a lesson learned for us. Also, I want to speak about Armenian identity, which is very important in this context. When nation and mass in its entirety acts in one way, that means that it is linked to identity. Everything is linked to the national identity. Even foreign policy is linked to the national identity. And national identity, it's being constructed. It's an evolving concept. It evolves, you can see here on the slide, it is shaped by cultural, geographic, political, and social factors. Identity is a product of self-consciousness, that we possess distinct quantities as an entity that differentiates us from others. Identities are important because they shape the behavior of people. Whatever identity we have, then we act accordingly. How others perceive a group nation affects the self-definition of that group. We also know that. And that how we are perceived by others, that also change. We are very proud people, but at the same time, I read somewhere, oh, Armenians are very arrogant. We don't like to talk about that. We try to skip these kind of questions, hard questions. But I was like, oh, we are not arrogant. Why we are perceived as arrogant? Or this way, maybe there is a mistake here. So, from one question to another, to another, to another, and then we come to the point that what are our values? We come to the point of the value system. Values matter. This revolution is also about values. Everything is about values. Individual behavior, but also collective behavior, national behavior. It's about values. When I was teaching at Yerevan State University, we have a wonderful, it's not a department, it's a Center for European Studies. It's a center for European Studies, and my students are not only Armenians, but also they come from all over the world, mostly from Europe. And I was asking them a question. It's not a provocative question, it's a question, just a question. Who are Armenians? I was asking the same question to Armenians, I was asking my students from Europe, from other parts of the world. Armenians are Europeans, Armenians are Asians, Armenians are Eurasians, as Russians consider themselves to be Eurasians. So, and as a nation that we lived on the crossroads between Europe and Asia for centuries, for millenniums, and then living in this environment on the crossroads, we have both very strong European cultural and civilizational traits, but also Asian. So you would be interested to know the answer that I was getting when I was asking my students, we are Asians or Europeans? They were telling, we are not Asians, we are not Europeans. I was asking, then what we are? Like, we are Armenians. I said, okay, I understand, we are Armenians, but like, there is a bigger entity, Europe. Europe until the 18th century was called Christendom. So, and there is, I was telling, I'm very proud to have both Asian roots and both European roots, but culturally I am European. So where we are, only 2 students among the group of 25. They told, one told we are Europeans, another told we are Asian. The rest, we are Armenians. So it's a distinct identity, we are Armenians. And we cannot be put in this basket, bigger basket. I was like, wow, it's interesting. I need to make conclusions accordingly. So, I remember, if I'm not mistaken, it was 2001, if I'm not mistaken, when Armenia was becoming a member of the Council of Europe. And I had the privilege of giving a speech on this occasion. And I was telling, like, we are Europeans, but I am very proud of my Asian roots. Everyone like, wow, what does it mean? And then I was explaining that, so that we talk about Armenian civilization and Armenian civilizational values. So, and the rest is your choice, what you want to be, where you can be. It's also interesting to analyze when this revolution happened. So the ideas of Mahatma Gandhi, how they were applied in Armenia. It's really fascinating how they applied. So, protest walk, Salt March. So when Nikol Pashinyan started his walk, protest walk, It was the same example. What I want to come to, what kind of a conclusion, that we don't live in isolation as a nation. We live in a bigger world. And the best practices in the world are applicable for us. We borrow these ideas. We shape also locally these ideas. We make those ideas Armenian, but those ideas, like Mahatma Gandhi's, were applied. I'm happy for this. In 1990 December, I have written an article in the newspaper Hike about the applicability of Mahatma Gandhi's concept of satyagraha, non-violent resistance and social disobedience in Armenia. And who could think that, like in 2018, those were really how those were manifested. And I decided when I go back to republish that. That would be interesting also for me also to go over that again. And also another thing, for example, Viking Club. And then you followed the news on videos. So in Iceland, I was reading an article published in Iceland. Oh, Viking Club in Armenia. So it was really great. It was fascinating. So these different international manifestations in Armenia during the revolution. Also, it led the movement to unprecedented degree of unification among all Armenians. Young people were on the streets, in the squares, but eventually we realized that the entire society was there, so different ages. There was an unprecedented level of organization of the Armenian nation. Very often we are told that Armenians as individuals, they are very strong, they are very individualistic in general. As a collective body, in a group, they are not so successful as individuals. So this is a great example that we are wrong. It's great to be successful individually and also collectively, because what we saw in Armenia, that was unprecedented level of organization and mobilization. And what Nikol Pashinyan was telling and people were following, it was amazing how they were following. That's also Armenian. And also the value system. The value system apparently was resilient, very much resilient, even though shaken, but resilient. One of the key roles of the revolution was also to reject the distorted ethics and code of behavior which was not typical, which was oligarchic, was not typical, was not characteristic to our nation. And such, and not only we are talking about modern Armenia, we are talking about Armenia through history. So since childhood, I heard very many stories, I read very many books that because of treason, because of this, we lost, because of negative threats of this or that individual or statesman or politician or military, we lost. And we faced this kind of adversities. But at the same time, when we analyze that, we see that it's also part of the life. We should focus on positive. We should focus on great positive characteristics and features that our nation has, that we should be very proud of that, and we are proud of those. And what are those? We can see here. Dignity, justice, freedom, honesty, trust toward each other, tolerance, solidarity, mutual respect, openness, courage. Many people would say love. So you would say honesty, trust. I'll bring an example from the 17th, 18th centuries Armenian history, when Armenian merchants, Khojas, or merchant princes from New Julfa, they established the international network, trading network. And these Iranian Armenians accomplished unbelievable success in international trade, having even monopoly in some periods of history in transit trade of silk, etc. And when I was reading documents, books on that, I realized that there was unbelievable level of trust between those men. One was giving a loan of astronomical amounts to the other, and then just on a piece of paper writing how much money was given, just a piece of paper. That's it. And in 3-4 years, that merchant was coming back, giving the amount back with the interest, and never any problem of mistrust or deceit happened. What is this? We have this. This is our trait. This is our characteristic. So, not discrimination, not intolerance, but tolerance is our characteristic, and should be our characteristic if it's not absolute. Regrettably, it's not absolute. I put it mildly. So it should be tolerance in all aspects. This is important part of our value system. And also, the perception that there cannot be a change in political terms was broken. And people realized that change can happen. And when I traveled to Georgia, I was talking to people everywhere, sitting in cafes, in a cab, so talking to people, asking them, look, like, Saakashvili was pretty much popular in Armenia, like, why you don't like him? So, and why you went for change? And they were telling me, yeah, that's not important. What is important? That we can change the government. Our vote matters and counts. That's important. So, in case of the Armenian Revolution, why I titled my presentation Armenia Transformed? Because Armenia is already transformed. There are processes going in Armenia, there are different powers in Armenia. It's not, the process is not accomplished yet fully. Maybe there will be upcoming elections. There are processes, not maybe, but for sure, there are processes in Armenia. But at the same time, the transformation is completed. The nation is transformed because the nation realized that it is possible peacefully, legally, through constitution to change the government. It doesn't matter what government. It doesn't matter. It's a matter of principle. That is possible to change. And also people understood that very often when there was a facade, and there was completely different picture behind the facade. Completely different picture. Facade, everything looks great, everything is bright, everything is wonderful. We have 3 branches of power, independent branches of power, but everyone knew that this is facade. Behind that, for example, the courts are not independent. judges are not independent. Or civil society. We have a great, strong civil society that we saw also throughout those days and weeks. But everyone knew that also civil society was also a government process of funding some of civil society organizations, having them on payroll. That is also a reality. So facade and behind the facade, what is? And now the concept which is very important for us. We go also to our moral principles, moral vision, and also value system, that we don't need facade and behind facade. The life is what the life is, the reality is. And honesty is important for realistic assessment of life, our daily life, and also political system. I put here also vision. Vision, I want to talk a little bit. I'll finish in a couple of minutes. I remember those days when in 2008, myself, Ruben Shugarian, and few of our other friends, we made a statement, and this statement was read at a public rally in Yerevan by Nikol Pashinyan, by the way. The statement was read, and after that, I was out of the foreign ministry after that statement, and the EU ambassadors, all European Union ambassadors, together they invited Yvette, my wife Yvette, and me for lunch in a restaurant in Yerevan. We were sitting, all the EU ambassadors, and I used to work with the EU closely, and we were talking about vision, about the future of Armenia. And they were asking me how you see Armenia. And I was describing them Armenia based exactly on the value system that I was talking about now. Exactly on that value system, based on that. And one of the ambassadors, German ambassador, asked me, she said, like, how many people think like you in Armenia? So I said, many. She said, I disagree, she said, not many. I said, no, really many. If they don't speak up, it doesn't mean that there are not many of them. Many, and even I took the liberty to say the majority, they were in shock. Like, really? I said, yeah, that's the vision. That's our dream. To have a strong country, strong, prospering country based on value systems, and statesmen acting based on principles, and principles reinforced by the Constitution. And nation being perceived differently worldwide. And even when I say nation, I mean the entire nation, including diaspora. Diaspora also is being perceived differently, worldwide. Last point, what kind of projections for future we can come with. So, when we look at the perspective of developments in a way that corresponds to that vision, corresponds to that dream. Everything starts with the dream. If you don't dream, nothing happens. But if you dream, then the reality will follow. So when we have the dream of building a completely new society which is free of poverty, society which is not stratified, not marginalized, society where people are happy to be part of. Happy is the key word, is happy to be part of, where justice prevails, when Armenian diplomats, and I can tell you that the Armenian Foreign Ministry has wonderful diplomats that can be compared to the best diplomatic establishments in the world, no exaggeration. When these diplomats stand on a firm ground and then act, when any statesman in Armenia stands on a firm ground of this morality, of this code of behavior, which has a strong stamp of morality, principles, and value system, then we will build a country, Armenia, that is completely different. That is our dream. And that is simple. There is no need for what level of sophistication to come to that. Very many people would say we live in the neighborhood that it might be impossible. I would say the opposite. It is very much positive. This neighborhood is a neighborhood of opportunities. When we talk about dragons, I was born in the year of dragon. Dragon can be very positive. I'm joking, of course, but dragon can be very positive. South Caucasus is a region of opportunities. And it doesn't matter. We are in Europe, we are in Asia. Armenia, until 1992, was part of Asia, officially. In 1992, Armenia became part of Europe. When officially, and it is part of Southeast Europe now. In 1992, the United Nations General Assembly group of regional group, there are regional groups. Armenia, when became part of the United Nations in March 1992, Armenia was allocated to the Eastern European group of nations by the United Nations. Other institutions were a little bit slow to adopt that. But since 1992, officially it's part of Europe. But my point is, it doesn't matter. You are in Europe, you are in Asia, or you build your future just on the crossroads. That's an opportunity. That's a strategic location. That's a future for our nation. And this future is bright. This is our future. And what we need, it's pretty much simple. Very difficult to realize, to implement, but it is simple. It's called simply good governance, with its principles that the United Nations have. Participation, all men and women should have a voice in decision making. Rule of law. Rule of law. The society is based on the idea that we are all abide by the same rules, whatever our wealth or status. No one is above the law, not even the government. Transparency, responsiveness, consensus, orientation, equity, effectiveness and efficiency, accountability, strategic vision. And strategic vision part is very important. Leaders and the public have a broad and long-term perspective on good governance and human development, along with a sense of what is needed for such development. There is also an understanding of the historical, cultural, and social complexities in which that perspective is grounded. And I want to express my belief. I'm pretty much convinced that we will be able to do that, to achieve this, to realize those principles and allow me to conclude my presentation with the following. When in the 17th century, in China, in remote East Asia, Europeans, when they were traveling in China, they were putting on Armenian dresses. They were trying to disguise themselves as Armenians, if I can put it this way, to present themselves as Armenians. Why? Europeans. Why? Because Armenians were treated very well everywhere. When Armenians were traveling, people were telling they didn't come with a sword, they didn't come to change our religion, they didn't come to conquer, and Armenians just come to live amongst us, they come to trade, they come to enrich us, and our countries and cities are gonna benefit from their work and from their efforts. And today, the pride of being an Armenian and how Armenian is perceived as it was the late medieval ages and modern period until today, if we all collectively would desire building a country that is what we want to see, which corresponds to our aspirations, national aspirations, then we will be able to achieve that. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you, Armen. Before we start the question period, I have a question for you, which I think everybody would be very interested in hearing your perspective on that. The situation is clear now. There is a government of young men and women. By the way, only a couple of women, I think, which is not good. And then there is the parliament, which is totally owned by opposition. That's okay. Which is totally owned by the opposition. And therefore, there's still a lot of hurdles ahead. So if you can say a few words about the concrete situation and what you picture as what might happen and how they can actually overcome these hurdles and really organize a good elections that will be free and fair.
Thank you for the question. I firmly believe that the processes that are happening in Armenia are irreversible. What does it mean? That means that, those questions become just technical questions. When elections will take place in the fall or by the end of the year, next year. I believe this year, but there are different scenarios. But more importantly, that when elections take place, so then people will realize that they are the owners of the country, if I can use this term. They are masters of this country in a very positive sense. Their voices are heard. Their votes are counted. So that means that the level of legitimacy that present leadership Nikol Pashinyan enjoys in Armenia, it's fantastic level of legitimacy that people granted him. So that will be also institutionalized through the elections. We'll have a parliament representative which will be based on the votes of people. And the entire strategy, planning, etc. will occur accordingly. I don't want to go into technicalities. The question can be if elections, they don't happen today, tomorrow, in a year? Could it be like in 3 years? Could it be in 2 years? I can tell you that Nikol Pashinyan as Prime Minister and his team, entire team, and the President, they have many options to move forward. And don't forget about referendum. Referendum, which is also, people are entitled to referendum by constitution, which also can be put in motion at some point. I hope I answered your question.
The point was that, what do you think about the fairness of the elections? Would it be possible for him to organize the elections in such a way that the parliamentary faction, the opposition, will not be able to interfere and disrupt?
Mm-hmm. Yes, so in this process, so of course it's very important to have new electoral code, new electoral laws. It's important. It's key, but not the absolute key, because it's more important this level of legitimacy that I was talking about, and the decisiveness of people in their choice, but having proper electoral code, and proper organization of the elections, what I can see now, what we all see now, what we can conclude, so the elections will be fair, because otherwise it will not serve the goal of the entire revolution.
Yes, no,
Can I take the microphone or should it be okay?
it will be fine.
Yeah, that would be fine.
Yeah. Okay.
I thought your analysis was outstanding. Absolutely, all of us think you are exceptional in explaining